Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Sum It Up. We're honored to welcome today's guest, Frank Carbajal, a leader whose journey reflects resilience, vision, a deep commitment to lifting others as he climbs. Frank has spent decades open doors for Latino leaders and entrepreneurs across the country, proving that when one of us rises, we all rise. I know you're going to understand the power of Frank's story and his vision. And what we've been waiting a really long time, Frank, to have you with us today. And we're just so happy that you were able to join us. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Joel, and I appreciate being here. And good morning to everyone. And I'm ready. And your co-host, I'm glad to meet. I know you're based in Puerto Rico, correct?
Yeah, en Puerto Rico, sí.
Sí, buenos días a todos. Y gracias, Harry, muy amable para la invitación.
Sí, buen día.
All right.
So, Frank, we want to start at the beginning, as we do with all of our guests here. You have a powerful story about your beginning, your parents, your migrant roots. And so, share a little bit with our viewers here today in our community about what that was like, how that relates to the leader that you've become. Share a little bit about those early years with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks again for this invitation and to all the listeners. I hope it resonates with folks listening in. For me, my parents, they immigrated from Mexico. And what was going on during that time was Bracero program. At the tail end of the Bracero program, I was born the youngest of five in 1969 in an area known as Imperial Valley, which is about 35 miles north of the border of Mexicali and Mexico. And so my parents' farm work really not only hard work, but was a pathway to citizenship. And in the early 1970s, when I was just 3 years old, they moved up to the Silicon Valley, but then it was known as Santa Clara Valley. And Santa Clara Valley, becoming the booming Silicon Valley, was an area where I grew up in East San Jose. And I like to say it didn't have the same equitable access and rights to what we see even today in 2026. And so my story is everyone's story that had experienced the same situation, whether it was migrant farm work or the sacrifices that our padres make to make sure that we become, in many circumstances, first-gen graduates from college.
And so, Frank, I have to ask you about growing up you said East San Jose in the early 1970s.
Yeah.
And I kind of made up a term to try to sound smart, but I'm not really that smart. But I'm going to call it a geographical juxtaposition. Knowing in the 70s was the beginning of the rise of Silicon Valley,
Right.
Personal computing and Intel and Apple. And what kind was it like being geographically close to kind of this explosion? And how did that map kind of culturally and economically to where you sit? Like this juxtaposition just so interested me. I'd love to hear kind of how you internalize that.
No, Harry, I love the question because, the story that I share is that in the young age of the second, third, fourth, and fifth grade, it was from the 70s to the early 80s. I share the story that my parents would gather us up in my dad's 1977 Datsun pickup truck, and we all would back up in the camper of the truck. And what we had was love, but he would take us to work and doing this migrant work and picking whether it was cherries or other crops. And I'll never forget that I was always aware of where we were going as far as the areas in the fields, and geographically from the East San Jose area, we drove to Cupertino area, where the foundation and the formation of Apple computers was established. And so I'll never forget that my eldest sister, said, that is the house of Steve Jobs and Wozniak. And, they started in their garage and, passing these homes of these icons. I just felt like there had to be more for our community. And in terms of the accessibility, I knew early on that for the Latino community, it's education. But the geographical areas is interesting because Harry and Joel, one of the things that I touched on just a few years ago, I don't know if you all heard of Angeles Investors, but there was an annual summit, and it was in the spring, and a dear friend of mine, Marcelo DeSantis, he really liked the mindset of where I was going with the presentation, and I talked about the infrastructure divide. The infrastructure divide is, if you live in California, the biggest freeway is 101, and I call it the 101 infrastructure divide. And what I mean by that is, in the hands of Latinos, we help build these beautiful buildings, whether it was Apple, Nvidia, Google, Meta. The backs of the Latinos in terms of construction work is literally building that infrastructure. But the divide is that east of the 101 are the homes and many of the places where as Latinos, we reside, but we don't have the same access in getting into the walls in these buildings. And the reason why it's important is we need not only mentoring, but we need to level up, and we really need to build this ecosystem of success in terms of being the architects of, for now, today is AI, being the architects behind AI.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that. We have places here in Denver too, where literally the railroad tracks made a difference in which side you were on. Really, it had to do with race, socioeconomics, and ultimately destiny and outcomes. And so that really resonates for us here as well. Tell us a little bit, though. You talked a little bit about education and the role that education played for you and your own leadership journey, but you've really made that a focal point of really encouraging others' pathways to education leading to opportunity. Tell us a little bit about your educational journey and how it played a role for you.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because where I was attending school, from grade school to high school, it was interesting that, busing and transportation, we would walk a few steps from our home and take this big, school bus to the Evergreen area, which is about a mile and a half of East San Jose. And what I saw, it was an integrated school. And what I saw was how interested our educators, our teachers were in really elevating Latino first generation students in the classroom. And for me personally, it was, and folks will know this right now, is I had a speech impediment when I was in grade school because of the transition from being a Spanish speaker to an English speaker in terms of enunciation and that transformation of language was just really, and I always maintain Español es muy importante en la casa, but for me, it was something that gave me a problem early on. So being in speech therapy from the 3rd to the 6th grade, I'll never forget a teacher by the name of Miss Sanders, who was my speech therapist, realized that I had not only the potential, but that education was really something that I was dreamt of as far as achieving. And in middle school, of course, getting involved in sports and having coaches that really invested in me. And so the thing that I did see in terms of a challenge was that in high school, if a kid was in calculus or other, AP courses, they would have to leave the school that I was at and transport to another school. And so I think that as far as equity, it's still today a challenge. And I feel that one of the things that we often say many times is STEM-related fields and how unoccupied positions need to be occupied by, Latinos. But the problem that I see and the challenge is STEM has to start at pre-K level. It has to start early on, from kindergarten to 1st grade, because what I've seen, Joel and Harry, is as a migrant ed, I was a migrant ed student athlete, but as a migrant ed student, what happens many of the times is the level of education for many of our parents stops at the third and the fourth grade.
Yeah.
Not because our parents wanted to stop, learning at third and fourth grade, because as we know, we have the most wise of parents and grandparents that los dichos, the sayings and things that really amplify our voices. But at the same time, if our parents stopped at third and fourth grade, and at the most at sixth grade, guess what? That's when STEM related programming in our mind really resonates, whether it's math, science, and to get to those courses like calculus and physics, it really needs to start early on.
And with your path, Frank, given kind of the odds, and I can make the assumption along your career path, being the only one in the room is quite of a normal thing for you along the way. But what kept you going against all odds? You go on to 2 books and Es Tiempo and Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. What kept you going along the way? Where did you get that resiliency and that fight and that self-confidence and belief from?
I love the question. Outside of my parents, it was my coach from early on. When I was 12 years old, I had a Brazilian coach who really, Josue, he really believed in me. He made me a team captain at a young age. And I'll never forget that I grew up in a barrio, and many folks who don't know what a barrio is really a setting that you don't need anything outside of your neighborhood. You have everything you need in your neighborhood, right? You feel insulated. But when you want to really compete in today's world, you need access to many resources. Mm-hmm. And so what Coach Josue did is, I'll never forget, in growing up in the barrio, he didn't live too far from us, but he lived in this beautiful 2-story home. And he took the whole team to his home. And in the 6th grade, his wife was making chocolate chip cookies. I know this sounds weird, but that's the first time I've ever had chocolate chip cookies. I just smelled them, right? I'm like, what? We love the tortilla smell, but I was like, what is that? Oh my goodness, it smells good. So she provides a tray, and what he did for us is he put on old tapes of Pele. And Pele, was just not only a team player, a winner, but I feel that what Josue was stressing to us is, in order to succeed in life, you have to play as a team, and collectively you have many more chances to succeed with people versus being alone. And so I felt that team mindset and concept was instilled early on by the coach. And I feel that we in life need many coaches or teachers that not only believe in us, but once we have that, we have to, and I also ran track, we also have to, like I say, a metaphor is pass that baton. Literally, I have a baton, from track. And I think that's important because many of the times, and I love this Summit Up. Many of the times, as the founder of the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, as you all know, the summit isn't about us, it's about others. And it's really about lifting and elevating others, because that baton metaphor really is about passing to the future. And I feel that many of the times when we have folks that lift their own voice, well, that's great, but it really is going to, it's really going to plateau to a certain level that's not going to achieve what we want to achieve. And that is that ecosystem that needs to be built.
I almost have to take a pause. I'm feeling all sorts of feelings right now with you saying that, Frank, particularly, I think, under the microscope and with the realities of what leadership is and requiring of Latinos today. And that I think more than ever, we do need that collaboration. Cumbre to us means, and it is true, together we rise. And it is only together that we can rise, achieve success, continue the momentum, continue the work. Yes. And, you've been someone who has not just said that, but you've really lived by that through your efforts to bring community together, to show up, to lift others up. But talk to us a little bit from your perspective, what this moment looks like for Latino leaders, why that's more important. What are our opportunities and what are the challenges you see before us from your perspective?
Yeah, Joel, that's very important. One thing I think when I think of the challenge, we'll go to the challenge and then we'll go to the solution. I think that the challenge is many companies, organizations have done without the word DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I always emphasize that amongst us collectively, we have diversity. We need equity. And the inclusion part is really about making sure that we build allies outside of our group, outside of our Latino community. Because one thing that we do not want to deal with is in silos.
Mm.
Silos are things that really could have success within that core moment. But in terms of today's moment and time, in order to push through, we really collectively have to include everyone. And we're in a time today where, for our listeners, I hope there's many non-Latinos understanding that we want to work together, and that's inclusion. We already have the diverse part.
Yeah.
That's not even a problem. But I think that when it comes to equity is one of the challenges that we have to collectively work together on. And what I mean by that is education. As I had mentioned, a few stories of my access to equity was very challenging, but it took mentors and people who believed in me. And then we talk about the Silicon Valley in terms of equity and access to venture capital. It really is something that I stress that we have many, many talented Latinos in our community that have that entrepreneurial mindset and spirit. But when it comes to folks writing checks, it really has to be not only a, not only challenging the VC or the angel investor, but continue being persistent and understanding that we need to be invested in. We are the largest consumer base in the country, but as we know, the consumer base, that's easy. We could spend.
Yeah.
But when it comes to investment power, that is where we really need to focus on that side of the coin. And
Mm-hmm.
and by doing that, we have to really go into a room with confidence and have a product. See, product is very important. But many of the times, what I've seen, and I share this with everyone, is I've experienced how many of our own Latino VCs and venture capitalists have encouraged Latinos to start a 501c, start a nonprofit, versus providing early stage capital. And the early seed funding is where you really get things moving, because then other VCs are going to believe. So my point is that we need to believe in one another first, and then the inclusion part really comes together in terms of the equity piece of
Mm-hmm.
things. And
Mm-hmm.
because what I've seen many of the times is walking into a room where there are non-Latinos that have started an organization, and who do they show as the consumer? They show our Latino faces as the consumer. But then when you look at the big picture, we want to see who are the founding members.
Yes.
And the founding members, we want to see folks who look like us and believing in us and building that investment power.
Frank, on that, how do we start to unlock, I call it our internal power, right? I use the example, we talk about our GDP and we say we're 4 trillion. I always say, great, that's an economic position. That doesn't mean it's economic power. It's a position, it's a number. And we talk about demographic shifts, great, it's a number. We know the numbers are coming, but that's, as you know, very different from the power. What needs to happen internally for us to unlock that as we kind of think kind of externally? What needs to happen internally? Like we have, you throw these numbers out, right? And we talk about a fifth, fifth largest economy, growing numbers, but it's not translating out. Why and what needs to be done?
Yeah, I love the question. And I think one of the things that we need to do is we have to write as I'd mentioned, the baton, we have to write a list of folks, say the top 10 folks that you know that are in our community, the Latino community, that are the power players that really have the capital to challenge our own community to say, well, could you please write a check? And I think that's the start. And there has to be an end game. The goal in mind is to make sure that we are being talked about when we're not in the room.
Yes.
And what I mean by that are those 10 names. Just, I give everyone homework that's listening in. Go to your journal, go to your notebook, go to your Apple Notes, and write down 10 names of who you think are the most influential Latinos with money. And by doing that, then you ask yourself, how could I get a hold of this person? Because we know the names. And what happens is we understand that some of these folks do have summits and large events. But we want to make sure that it just doesn't end, in that 2 or 3 day, 4 day summit. In terms of a continuum, you go to that list and you say, well, how could we continue to work not only together to make things happen? Because I'll share a quick story with you. I've been to, in terms of the inclusion piece, I've been to various summits. I was invited to an all-black summit. I was invited to, when I say all-black, I mean like Black entrepreneurs. And then I was invited to, as a guest, to an Israeli summit. And when I looked on their big board and I saw, for example, the sponsors, I saw over 100 sponsors on each big board. And I think that what we go back to that consumer base. We have so many consumers that are, think about the iPhone, that are buying iPhones every day, right? But at the same time, we really have to go to the list and see what we can do in terms of the challenge.
Yeah. I love it. Just, I want to call out and thank everyone. We have people joining from all over today, Frank, and I knew that was going to be the case. They love what they're hearing from you. Anna, just, show me the money. She's having a Jerry Maguire moment. I love that. And I want to bring it back to that because I think, you named your business Es Tiempo. It's time. Everything you've done, and I want to make sure people know about the summit that'll happen in October. We have some connectivity there this year. So
if I could announce that Joel Martinez is the closing keynote speaker for the summit on October 10th.
So we're doing good things together in that collaborative. But tell us more about Es Tiempo. Why that name? Because that name matters so much. It's more than a name. There's something built behind it. Talk to us about that mentality that's behind it, and then share with us about this work that you're doing and how people can learn more about it, get involved, to your point, to show up not just with money, but also with activation and engagement and collaboration.
Yeah. So, everyone listening, if you grew up in a Spanish household, whatever you do, listen to your parents, your grandparents. I had mentioned los dichos. Dichos are something that really um, give us that, not only the motivation, but the activation is what's important. And so early on in the year 2000, I remember sharing with my dad, mi papa. I said, Dad, in Spanish, I said, quiero escribir un libro. I said, I want to write a book. And he says, pues, mijo, ya es tiempo. It's time. And I thought about that one, that one word. And as many of us, before we become entrepreneurs, we're working a full-time job, but we're dreaming of becoming entrepreneurs. The setting that you're at your office and you're looking around, you're like, man, what am I doing here? I could be doing what I really want to do and go after my business. And so I look to my right, and my colleague is doing the same thing. I could see he's like kind of daydreaming, right? He's planting his own seeds of leadership. And he was also a part-time pastor. And I look over at him and I say, hey, you know what? I said, let's take a break. And so we walk out, and I let him know. I said, I'm thinking of writing a book and starting a business. And at first, before an LLC, a sole proprietorship. And he's like, really? He's like, do you have, and this is like, the domain names where you register a domain. And he's like, really, what are you thinking about? I said, well, I have two business names in mind. He's like, what are they? And I said, the first one is e-salud, your health. He's like, oh, that's interesting. He's like, what's the second one? I said, well, I was talking to my dad, and Es Tiempo. He's like, that one right there. Go with Es Tiempo. And so that is how it really started, the conversation at home and with the colleague who's Latino, and really understanding that, especially today, in today's climate, when they're trying to strip us away from, speaking Spanish, I think it really is more important to share not only Spanish, but it's time to really get things going, because at every moment it's time. And I think for us, it's time every day. Es tiempo every day, every moment. And I feel that we could do it. We could achieve it. We could succeed. But at the same time, we have to, as I mentioned with my coach, collectively as a team, work together versus trying to take a person's dream away by I'll just say it, by being a hater. Be an embracer. Don't be a hater. Be an
embracer. And why, as we kind of build that out, one of the things that really kind of caught me was El Futuro Latino, that you co-authored. And I want to ask in this respect, because we're talking about building ecosystems. Yes, it's about Silicon Valley, it's about the United States, but you talk a lot about shared stories and connections across the diaspora, which we love, and Joel talked about it, and I love it. And coming from Puerto Rico, I love it because I just see it. South America, Latin America, Caribbean, we come in the United States, we're going back and forth. How do we start to build interconnected, broader ecosystems and not stay even siloed within just the United States? Because it comes back and forth, and it still ends up benefiting the United States. But we have this power that is like this ripple effect when you throw a stone into a water that keeps coming out, and that broader makes us incredibly unique in the world.
I learned early on, and I didn't have this experience, but I'm seeing this in my own kids. I know, Joel, you have kids, and Harry, do you have kids?
Sí.
Well, what I've learned is my wife has encouraged our kids to travel, and I think traveling without any second guessing is the way to really expose our community to real life situations, whether it's studying abroad, in Latin America, or traveling on your own to our home countries, where I say home countries where our parents and one day would love to go to Puerto Rico. But I think when you do that, you really learn much more. But at the same time, in terms of Harry, El Futuro Latino was really something that I feel blessed, because the first book, Building a Latino Future, was translated and picked up by Grupo Norma in Colombia. And a couple of days ago, I gave a shout out to my co-author, because he was born in Venezuela, and Venezuela won the World Baseball.
Yeah.
And I was very happy for the country of Venezuela because it really resonated with the orgullo of not only a team sport but a team and collectively as a country. And I think that when we really share our authentic feelings of all Latino countries, I think then that's when it comes together. And so intentionally, it was an intention when I interviewed folks for the first book of Latinos from representing all Latin countries, whether it was Panama, El Salvador, Guatemala, South America, different countries in South America, Mexico, first and second, third generation American Latinos. I think collectively, when we have the stories that come together, there's one common thread, and that common thread is education. And that common thread of education, whether it's excelling in computer science or lifting our community that are achieving great success in trade schools, I think that's important, and we have to really be respectful of all industries. And so that is the key, is really understanding that yes, we're collectively a diverse community, but at the same time, we're also diverse in industries, and we have to be respectful of all the industries. And one thing I want to mention is that I learned early on that my father, he retired as a janitor, and there's that famous saying that you treat the CEO, you treat the CEO the same way you treat the janitor. And I feel that I learned that early on from my dad. So as far as our work experience, our professional experience, we really have to respect one another.
Yeah. I could talk to you all day, and I'm so excited I get to see you on Monday. so we can talk more. I know our time here is short, and I just want to honor that. I also want to say shout out to my grandfather, who was the custodian of his high school, and that's what he retired as well. So there's so much pride in the work. There's so much pride in our contributions economically, entrepreneurially. I mean, there's just pride, Futuro, as you talked about, I think, amongst the community, and you helped lift that up today. So I want to thank you. It's called Sum It Up for a reason. And my last and final question is the question we'll give out to all of our guests, which is, if you were to sum up Latino potential in a single sentence, what is it from your perspective?
Resilience.
Wow, he went a single word. I love it. Usually I have to cut off our guests.
You can drop the mic there. We're good.
Resilient. Do you mind me sharing a last thing? Is that it's because Harry, especially, I want to share that football right behind me. It was from the Super Bowl. Bad Bunny performed. I went to the Super Bowl, and I went because of Bad Bunny. Well, my daughter is the one that talked us into going because she's a Bad Bunny fan. But I just think that one of his superpowers is the flags that were shown at the very end and walking out, and that's where the respect lies within our community, is respecting all of our Latino countries.
See.
Wow,
Open
Frank.
the door for everyone.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I thought we would go this whole show not talking about football or our teams. We have very different opinions when it comes to say that. I can show my footballs back here, but I won't.
I'll be side by side with Joel.
And Harry will sit on the side. He'll referee us when it comes to it. When the Broncos meet the 49ers.
Well, Joel, have you met Guillermo Diaz?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so he's a big Broncos fan. He's going to be an honoree at the summit in October. So we'll have two Broncos on the stage.
That's all I care about. It's power. So friends, everyone who's joined us for Sum It Up today from across the country, I thank you. I honor you. I honor Frank, his partnership, his leadership, his collaboration. From our parents to our education to the work that we do, we are building ecosystems, creating power across the diaspora, as Harry brought up, And I just leave you today with a lot of pride and hope for what we continue to build together. So thank you all for joining us today. And thank you, Frank, again, for your friendship and leadership.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. All right.